My name is Kelly, and I'm 23 years old. I just finished my second year at art college, and let me tell you, it's been quite an experience. But before I get into all of that, you need to know where I come from. I grew up in a house where I never felt like I belonged. My parents, Larry and Maria, always made it clear that my older sister, Julie, was their favorite. She's 5 years older than me and has always been a problem for me since the day I was born. Julie seemed to hate me from the start. She would tease me, break my toys, and make my life miserable. And my parents? They would just laugh it off, saying, "Oh, that's just how sisters are." But it wasn't normal. I remember when I was 15, I had a huge crush on a boy at school named Scott. I thought he was the cutest guy ever. I spent hours drawing pictures of him in secret, hiding them under my mattress, thinking no one would find them. But Julie found them, and you know what she did? She put them up on the school bulletin board for everyone to see. I still remember walking into school that day, people laughing, pointing, whispering. It felt like my whole world was falling apart. And Scott, he came up to me, all awkward and nervous, and said, "Kelly, I saw the drawings. Look, you're nice and all, but I don't like you that way." I ran home crying that day. When I got home, my parents were in the kitchen. I burst through the door, tears running down my face. "Mom, Dad, Julie embarrassed me at school. She found my private drawings." But before I could finish, Julie walked in with a smug look on her face. "Oh, come on, Teresa," she said, using the nickname I hated. "It was just a bit of fun. It's not my fault you can't take a joke." And you know what my parents did? They laughed. They actually laughed. "Sweetie," my mom said, wiping tears of laughter from her eyes, "you really need to toughen up. It's not Julie's fault you're so sensitive." That's why, when I got accepted into art college, I was thrilled. It was my way out of that house, away from the constant teasing and putting down. My grandmother was the only one who ever truly cared about me. She was the one who believed in my art and told me I had talent. When I got accepted, she insisted on paying for my tuition. "Kelly," she said with a smile in her eyes, "you have a gift. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. I'll make sure you get the education you deserve." For 4 years, she paid for everything: my tuition, my art supplies, even some extra money for living expenses. But then, just before my final year, she got sick. I remember sitting by her bedside, holding her weak hand. She looked at me with those kind eyes and said, "Kelly, my dear, I'm so proud of you. You're going to do great things." Then she turned to my parents, who were standing at the foot of the bed, and said, "Larry, Maria, I need you to promise me something. Promise me you'll pay for Kelly's final year. She needs to finish her education." My parents nodded seriously. "Of course, Mom," my dad said. "We promise." Grandma passed away a week later. At the reading of her will, we found out she had left her house to my parents and her jewelry to Julie and me. Julie, of course, quickly grabbed the diamond tiara. "I'll take this," she said. "Kelly can have the ring. She doesn't care about jewelry anyway. Right, Teresa?" I didn't argue. She was right, I didn't care much for jewelry. So I took the diamond ring and put it in a safety deposit box at the bank. I made friends quickly in college. There was Lily, a punk rocker with a talent for abstract art, and Brian, a quiet guy who could create sculptures that would take your breath away. They didn't care about my family drama. To them, I was just Kelly, the girl who could paint like nobody's business. "Hey, Linda," Lily said one day, using the nickname I actually liked. "There's a tattoo parlor downtown looking for someone to draw designs. You should apply." I was unsure at first my parents would lose it if they knew I was working in a tattoo parlor. But then I thought, why should I care what they think? So I applied, and to my surprise, I got the job. The owner, a big guy named Ryan with more tattoos than skin, took one look at my portfolio and said, "You're hired, kid." For the first time in my life, I was making my own money. It wasn't a lot, but it was mine. I didn't tell my parents or Julie about it. I could already imagine Julie's teasing voice, saying, "Oh, little Teresa's drawing pictures for tough guys now. How cute." College life was good for me. I threw myself into my studies, determined to make my grandmother proud. My professors praised my work, and I even won a few small competitions. But more importantly, I was happy. The years flew by, and before I knew it, I was finishing up my second year. As summer break approached, a familiar dread settled in my stomach. I had to go home. When I opened the door, I walked into chaos. The living room was full of people, all excited and busy. In the middle of it all stood Julie, smiling brightly as she held up a white dress. My mother was the first to notice me. "Oh, Kelly," she said, her smile fading slightly, "you're home. We weren't expecting you so soon." I stood there stunned. Julie was getting married? When did this happen? Julie turned to me, her smile turning into a smirk. "Oh, didn't anyone tell you? I guess we've all been so busy with the preparations that it must have slipped our minds." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. My own sister was getting married, and no one had even bothered to tell me. "Who's the lucky guy?" I managed to ask, trying to keep my voice steady. "This is Paul," Julie said, pulling forward a tall, handsome man I hadn't noticed before. "Isn't he dreamy?" Paul gave me a polite smile and extended his hand. "Nice to meet you, Kelly. I've heard so much about you." I shook his hand, wondering what exactly he had heard. Knowing Julie, probably nothing good. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of excited chatter downstairs. Julie was holding court at the breakfast table, surrounded by our parents and a couple of her bridesmaids. As I listened to their conversation, I learned that Julie had broken up with her previous boyfriend at our parents' insistence. Apparently, he had been involved with some dangerous people. "Thank God you listened to us, sweetie," Mom said, patting Julie's hand. "Paul is such a better match for you, and his family is so well off." I couldn't help but roll my eyes. Of course, that's what they cared about. Julie, with her usual smirk, turned to me and said, "Speaking of Paul, he's taking me out to dinner tonight." Not that you'd know anything about that, right, Teresa? Still haven't found a boyfriend. They all laughed, and I gripped my coffee mug tighter, trying not to cry. Some things never change. As the days went by, I tried to stay out of everyone's way. I spent most of my time in my room, sketching and counting down the days until I could leave. But one evening, I couldn't avoid the family dinner. We were all sitting around the table when Julie dropped her big news. "I've decided to wear Grandma's tiara for the wedding," she announced. "It'll look perfect with my dress." "Oh, that's a wonderful idea," Mom exclaimed. But Julie wasn't finished. "You know what would make it even better? If I had a matching piece to go with it, like, I don't know, a ring." I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. I knew exactly where this was headed. Mom's eyes lit up. "Oh, that's right. Kelly, didn't Grandma leave you a ring?" I nodded slowly, feeling sick to my stomach. "Well, there you go," Julie said, clapping her hands together. "Teresa, you'll let me borrow the ring for the wedding, won't you?" I put down my fork. "Borrow? For how long?" Julie laughed, a sound that sent chills down my spine. "Oh, silly Teresa, I mean you'll give it to me for good." "But Grandma left that to me," I protested weakly. "Come on, Kelly," Dad said sternly. "Don't be selfish. It's your sister's wedding day." I looked around the table, hoping to find anyone on my side. But all I saw were expectant faces, waiting for me to give in, like always. "Kelly," Dad said, his voice cold, "either you give the ring to your sister, or we won't pay for your final year of college." The room fell silent. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "But you promised Grandma," I whispered, tears welling up in my eyes. Julie let out a harsh laugh. "Oh, please. No one cares about promises made to some old woman." I stood up so fast my chair tipped over. "How dare you talk about Grandma like that?" I shouted. "That's enough," Dad roared. "Kelly, you have a choice to make the ring or your education. Decide." I looked at their faces, Dad's anger, Mom's disappointment, Julie's smug satisfaction. In that moment, I knew I had lost again. With shaking hands, I took off the necklace where I kept the key to my safety deposit box. I handed the key to Julie. The morning after the ring incident, I found Julie in the kitchen. "When exactly is your wedding?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Julie looked up from her coffee with a smug smile. "It's on the 30th. Why? Planning to ruin it?" I ignored her jab. 3 weeks. I had 2 weeks to get away from this toxic environment. "No," I replied calmly. "I'm going to visit a friend from college. I'll be back in time for the wedding." That afternoon, I packed my bags and left, heading to my friend Lily's place in the next city. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. Lily and I spent the week exploring art galleries, visiting local cafes, and just enjoying each other's company. It was exactly what I needed. But my peace was shattered a week later. I was scrolling through my social media feed when I saw photos of Julie's wedding. My sister looked radiant in white, with the diamond tiara sparkling on her head and my ring on her finger. The caption read, "Just married. Off to the Maldives with my hunky husband." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. With shaking hands, I dialed my mom's number. "Why didn't you invite me to the wedding?" "Julie gave me the wrong date," I said, my voice trembling. There was a long pause, then Dad's voice came on the line. "Kelly, your sister didn't want you there. She said you'd ruin her perfect day. We thought it was best not to tell you." I felt sick. "How could you do this to me? I'm your daughter too." "Don't be dramatic," Mom chimed in. "It's not like you really wanted to be there anyway, right?" I hung up, my whole body shaking with anger and hurt. A few days later, I returned home, only to find that Julie had also come back from her honeymoon. I walked into the living room and saw her with Mom and Dad, looking at apartment listings. I cleared my throat, and they all looked up. "Don't forget about my tuition," I said quietly. "You promised to pay for my last year if I gave Julie the ring." Dad shifted uncomfortably. "Actually, Kelly, we've decided to use that money as a down payment on Julie's apartment instead." It felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. "But you promised. You swore to Grandma." "Plans change," Mom said dismissively. "Julie needs it more. I'm sure you can figure something out." Julie was still laughing, a cruel, mocking sound that made my blood boil. I knew exactly what I was doing when I lunged at her, grabbing a fistful of her hair. Julie screamed, and suddenly everyone was shouting. Dad pulled me away, his face red with anger. "That's enough," he roared. "Kelly, get out of this house right now." I ran to my room, threw some clothes into a bag, and stormed out, slamming the front door behind me. As I walked away from the house, my heart pounding and tears streaming down my cheeks, I realized something. I ended up back at Lily's place, feeling completely lost and broken. For days, I barely left her guest room, alternating between crying and staring blankly at the walls. Lily did her best to comfort me, but nothing seemed to help. A week passed in this haze of despair. Then one morning, as I listlessly checked my email, I saw a message that made my heart stop. "Congratulations! You are the winner of the annual art school competition. Your prize includes a full scholarship for your final year of studies." I read the email 5 times, not believing my eyes. Then I let out a scream that brought Lily running. I handed her my phone, happy tears streaming down my face. "I won. I won a scholarship. I can finish school." Lily's eyes widened as she read the email. Then she pulled me into a tight hug. "Oh my God, Linda, this is amazing." For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. I could finish my degree without my parents' help. I could make my own way. When the new semester started, I threw myself into my studies with renewed energy. Between my classes and my part-time job at the tattoo parlor, I barely had time to think about my family drama. Months passed, and I slowly started to heal. One day, I was hanging out with my classmate Scott, who worked part-time at a local pawn shop. We were chatting about our day when he mentioned something that caught my attention. "You won't believe what happened during my shift today," he said. "This girl came in with the most beautiful diamond necklace and ring I've ever seen. Must have been worth a fortune." My heart skipped a beat. What did she look like? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Scott described a woman who sounded exactly like Julie. Can you draw the jewelry for me? I asked, my hands shaking slightly. Scott looked confused but agreed. As I watched him sketch, my suspicions were confirmed. The necklace was the one Julie had always bragged about, and the ring, it was my grandmother's ring. I asked, my mouth dry, "Is there any way you could get me the security footage from the pawn shop?" Scott must have seen the desperation in my eyes because he finally nodded. "Okay, I'll see what I can do." A few days later, Scott handed me a USB drive. "Here," he said, "but you didn't get this from me, okay?" I nodded gratefully and rushed back to my dorm room. With trembling hands, I plugged in the drive and opened the video file. There was Julie, clear as day, handing over the jewelry. But what shocked me even more was what happened next. As she turned to leave, a man entered the frame. Julie threw her arms around him, kissing him passionately. It wasn't Paul. I leaned closer to the screen, my heart pounding. As the man turned slightly, I guessed I recognized him. It was Julie's ex-boyfriend, the one her parents had forced her to break up with because of his criminal connections. I sat back, my mind spinning. Julie had sold her precious jewelry, including my grandmother's ring, and was apparently cheating on her husband with her criminal ex-boyfriend. Part of me wanted to immediately send this video to my parents, to Paul, to everyone who had ever believed Julie's lies. But another part of me hesitated. This was too big to act on impulsively. Months passed, and I thought I had put my family drama behind me. Then, out of the blue, my phone rang. It was my Aunt Laura, my mom's sister. "Kelly, darling, I have wonderful news." She chirped, her voice full of excitement. "Your sister is pregnant. Can you believe it? They're having a big announcement party next week. Isn't it exciting?" My heart sank. Of course, another family event I hadn't been invited to. "That's great, Aunt Laura. Thanks for letting me know." After hanging up, I sat on my bed, conflicted. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to continue cutting ties with my toxic family. But another part of me, the part that still held onto the video from the pawn shop, knew this might be my chance. 2 weeks later, I found myself standing outside my parents' house. Cars lined the street, and I could hear laughter and chatter from inside. Taking a deep breath, I walked up to the front door and rang the bell. Mom opened the door, her smile fading as soon as she saw me. "Kelly, what are you doing here?" Without answering, I pushed past her and stepped inside. I walked into the living room, and the chatter quickly died down as everyone noticed me. Julie, standing in the center of the room with Paul, looked like she'd seen a ghost. "What is she doing here?" Julie hissed. Dad's voice boomed through the room. "Kelly, get out of this house immediately. You're not welcome here." Confused murmurs rippled through the guests. I saw Paul's parents exchange worried glances. Mom, always concerned about appearances, forced a fake smile. "I'm so sorry, everyone. We've had to distance ourselves from Kelly. She's become quite greedy and unworthy of our family name." The room erupted into arguments. Some relatives defended me, while others sided with my parents. I raised my voice. "I have something to say." Gradually, the room quieted down, and all eyes were on me. I turned to Julie. "Congratulations on your pregnancy, sis. But I have to ask, why aren't you wearing Grandma's tiara and ring?" Julie's face went pale. Her mother-in-law spoke up. "Now that you mention it, I haven't seen that beautiful ring in a while. Julie dear, where is it?" Julie stuttered. "I sent them for restoration. They needed cleaning." I nodded slowly, pulling out my phone. "That's interesting because I have a video here that tells a different story." The color drained from Julie's face as I connected my phone to the TV. The security footage from the pawn shop began to play. There was Julie, clear as day, pawning the jewelry. Then, the moment that made everyone in the room, gasped Julie throwing herself into the arms of a man who was definitely not Paul, kissing him passionately. The moment the video ended, chaos erupted in the living room. Paul's face twisted with rage and pain as he turned to Julie. "Julie, what is this? Who is that man?" he shouted, his voice cracking. Julie burst into tears, mascara streaming down her face. "I can explain." Paul's mother stepped forward, her voice cold. "I think we all deserve an explanation, Julie." Paul's father, a stern-looking man, spoke up. "I think we need a paternity test immediately." As accusations flew and tempers flared, I quietly slipped out of the house. I had done what I came to do. The truth was out. For the first time in years, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Over the next few weeks, the full extent of Julie's deception spread through the family grapevine. I found out that Julie had been secretly meeting her ex-boyfriend, the one with criminal connections, behind Paul's back. She had been using Paul's money on him and even pawned her jewelry to pay off his debts. The paternity test results were the final blow. The baby wasn't Paul's. It was her ex-boyfriend's. Paul, understandably devastated, filed for divorce. He sued Julie for a large sum, citing emotional damages and financial fraud. Her ex-boyfriend, upon hearing about the pregnancy, disappeared without a trace, leaving Julie to deal with everything on her own. My parents, who had always favored Julie, had to face the harsh reality of her actions. They were forced to take out a big loan to help Julie pay the money Paul demanded. Their golden child had fallen, and they were left to pick up the pieces. In a twisted turn, they tried to blame me for everything. Mom left a voicemail on my phone, her voice bitter and accusing. "Are you happy now, Kelly? You've ruined your sister's life. I hope you're proud of yourself." I deleted the message without responding. Their words no longer had the power to hurt me. As for me, I returned to college, focused on my studies, and started building the life I wanted. I cut off all communication with my family, changing my phone number and email address. The toxic cycle was finally broken. It's been 4 years since that day when I exposed Julie's lies. I graduated from art college with honors, and my final project received praise from both professors and local art critics. Now, at 25, I'm working at the Harmony Art Gallery in the city. It's a dream come true. I'm surrounded by beautiful artwork every day, helping to curate exhibitions, and even organizing events for up-and-coming artists. But that's not all. I've been painting in my free time, and to my surprise and delight, my work has caught the eye of several collectors. I haven't forgotten my roots, though. I still create tattoo sketches in my spare time. It's become a cherished hobby, a link to the past that reminds me of how far I've come. Some of my designs have even been featured in tattoo magazines, which never fails to make me smile. As for my family, well, that's a complicated story. I've kept in touch with a few aunts and cousins who stood by me during the fallout. They keep me updated on the family drama, though I try not to let it affect me anymore. From what I hear, Julie is still living with our parents. She's unemployed, struggling to raise her child alone. Mom and Dad, facing their own financial troubles, are constantly pressuring her to find a job and move out. The arguments are frequent and bitter, or so I'm told. I haven't spoken to my parents or Julie since that day. They tried reaching out a few times at first, sending guilt-tripping messages and leaving angry voicemails, but I stayed firm in my decision to cut ties. Eventually, they stopped trying. On a brighter note, I've been dating a wonderful guy named Frank for the past year. He's a graphic designer I met at a gallery event. He's kind, supportive, and, best of all, he understands my passion for art. We're even talking about moving in together soon, which feels like another step toward building the life I want.